Hello, and thanks for joining us. Today, I'm joined by my guest, Mark Hinkins. He's the UK sales manager for Rex, and we're also joined by Tom McCarthy, who is the product manager for Rex. How you doing, guys?
Yeah, pretty good, David. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing not too badly at all. Today, we're going to try and make a subject that is sometimes a little bit dry for some people, a little bit more exciting, because what you can do with your data is actually quite exciting, and that's where the missed opportunities are. It's where the low-hanging fruit is. You don't necessarily need that business to walk through your door in order to generate more leads and results, because we are all of us sat on an awful lot of data. The issue that we've all got in various different CRMs is that the data's there, our staff are there, but we just don't know how to make it all come to light and how to actually sort of weaponize it. So I suppose this all comes down to reporting and that sort of power behind reporting and how easy it is to craft the reports that we need. So what are the sort of most common problems that agents face when it comes to reporting and data?
Oof, I think there's to borrow a phrase that I know a lot of our engineers use all the time. There's a classic engineering little idiom called like rubbish in, rubbish out, garbage in, garbage out. And I think in an estate agency context, that rings true, right? So probably the number one issue with reporting for any agency, regardless of whatever technology they are or aren't using, uh, the data quality is never really where you want it to be, right? So, this could be, duplicate data that's not really comprehensive, outdated information, stuff that's not getting cleaned up. Um, I think really every agency walks into any sort of reporting system and it's like, oh, I want to get great business outcomes from this. I want to use this to measure KPIs and drive business growth and prospect for new leads and that sort of thing. That's usually the first brick wall they hit, right? Is that the data quality isn't always there. I think it helps. Initially, I think it can mean people can not really trust what they're looking at. And then I think in a lot of the time, they don't really know what are the next steps to help just how bad is it, right? Like a lot of the time they might know that something's not right with the data, but they can't quite figure out what it
Yeah.
is. Maybe there's not enough reporting in the system for them to be able to actually kind of see just how bad the problem is, right? And so what ends up happening, I think, is a lot of agents just walk away, right? Disappointed, reporting dreams, never realized, and never really get around to it. I think reporting really often gets dropped in that nice to have basket, which is a shame. So I would say that's probably the biggest roadblock, I think, for agencies getting stuff out of any sort of reporting system for sure.
Because there's a lot of legacy data there, isn't there? Usually agents have had more than one CRM in their time and they've dragged data from one place to another. Whether they're meant to or not is another
Yeah.
question that we're not here to answer today. But I know particularly, from my previous experience in different agencies, we get paranoid about that data. We're like, no, don't delete it, don't throw it away. We need that. That's our, because you never know when you might need to call on something. But you're right. The data that we collect depends on the quality of the questions that we're asking and how
Yes.
diligently we're answering those questions and where we're recording it. And sort of back in the day, if you want to go back a few years, that the quality of info that we were getting was really scant. I mean, an email
Yeah.
address was a luxury in my day. If you could get an email address, it was a bonus. But that's we
Yeah.
sometimes had no other details there, and it's hard to sort of work with that. So what do you guys do when it comes to that kind of issue, and how does Rex handle it?
So you actually painted a nice picture there. Data quality can be kind of, there's two types, right? There's like administrative quality problems, like, duplicates and just rubbish nonsense.
Yeah.
Yes, ancient data, that sort of thing. But there's also like strategic kind of data quality issues. So like you historically haven't been qualifying your applicants very well, or that sort of thing, where it's like it is a data quality problem because you're not getting a full picture of perhaps your past interactions with a potential client. I think for the strategic data quality stuff, this is where things like our custom field system is really, really powerful, and we've kind of seen this really differentiate, compared to other players in the market. Let you be very, very granular and specific with how and what type of data you record when you're doing something like booking in an inspection or registering an applicant or something like that. And furthermore, you're able to report on these custom fields, which is also quite unique. So, our big flashy custom reporting system, one of the greatest elements of it is that you're actually able to pull in this custom data that you've been putting into the system and report on it and aggregate it and spin it any way you like. And so that helps get agencies into the flow of good strategic data practices, right? I think if it's kind of like a chicken and an egg situation where the biggest problem to maximize your value out of reporting is sometimes data quality. But on the flip side, the right kind of reporting is actually really helpful at identifying where your data quality issues are.
Yeah.
And the custom reports in particular, we've had some feedback from people that that's actually where it's been really, really useful. Is like they can kind of get a bird's eye view of the system for a whole time. And it's only by being able to pull in some, really granular fields that they're able to actually see where their data gaps are, which perhaps wouldn't be really very visible in a traditional sort of KPI report or something like that. So I think, a mix of the flexibility of custom fields and I think also the kind of the depth to which you can expose data problems with the custom reporting functionality. I think both of those tools are really, really helpful in this context.
So Mark, give us some of the examples, if you like, of how agents can better use that custom reporting and those fields. If there's a few sort of key tips, because at the moment that sounds great, the ability to sort of really get granular, but how would you use it, and how are you going to, more importantly, how do you then present that in a format that can be used by those agents? Is this something that you're bringing up in the morning meeting? Does this set the agenda for the day? What are the sort of next steps?
Yeah, so they can be used, I guess, really in multiple different ways. So as well as the main reporting center, or custom reporting center that we're sort of talking about now, we also have some very quick access dashboards. So in a morning meeting, you can pull up a quick access dashboard. But if you want to dive a bit deeper into that data, you can jump into the custom reporting center. And the reports that you produce can be they can be produced then and now, and just something for you to take a look at then, or it can be produced as a saved report that's part of like a static list. So that's a report that you can refer back to for one moment in time a couple of months ago, or that same report based on its parameters can be saved as a dynamic report. So hypothetically, the most simple version of it would be, what appointments did we book yesterday? So in terms of valuations, viewings, etc., what did we book yesterday? You could surface it in one quick dynamic report that you can just click on and view every single day. And that would be it in its, I guess, its most simple format. But then you can really, really dive into that historic data as well to look at how many of our, as an example, how many of our valuations did we then not get instructed on immediately, let's say within 2 to 4 weeks, but came back around for a second valuation and we did win an instruction on. That data is something that should be really, really important to agents, because it's showing the opportunities that they are actually taking control of and ensuring that they're following up. Whereas most systems, that data would go dead and an agent would try and pull up a list 6 months from now of valuations they didn't win, and find out actually we haven't been actively nurturing that data. We've just let it sit cold, and we're picking up the phone for an extremely transactional phone call to be like, hey, we did a valuation 6 months ago, you didn't instruct us, do you want another, basically.
I mean, that whole adage that, you can only manage what you can measure. We've been repeating that for as long as I can remember the first CRMs coming in, when we did away with bits of paper and those little boxes that we had there, the hot boxes. But the truth is, we are sometimes lazy when it comes to managing that data, but more importantly, we never always had the tools to measure it. And having this now at a glance and being able to sort of differ between those static lists and dynamic lists. I suppose that dynamic list will give you the ability to just hit that button, run the report based on the same criteria every time at any point in time going forward. So if I always wanted to know the number of valuations that we'd typically not instructed first time round, that's there forever, isn't it? Which is useful if you get into sort of a bit of a pattern in those morning meetings and we want to concentrate on improving one key parameter, then I suppose that's the way to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And it kind of, the way the system operates is very process driven. So hypothetically, if you did a valuation and a vendor had said to you, look, we're not going to instruct you now. We just want an idea of how much our property's worth. Give us a call in 12 months. Like I said, most systems, that's just going to go completely cold. But the processes in Rex will enable you to nurture that over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And the reporting functionality will be able to give you a clear summary of how well your processes are operating at the moment and enable you then to sort of iterate on those so that you can move the needle on that metric, which if you're moving your valuations instructed within 12 months from, let's say, I'm not sure what the figure would be, but 40%, you can move that up to 45%. Doesn't seem like a huge amount, but the volume that goes into that is a significant amount of potential additional fees.
Yeah, even that sort of, we keep talking about the power of marginal gains, don't we, in terms of how they stack up, but really never more true than in today's market as well, that sometimes where the market challenges are there, you can't necessarily just bump productivity from say 40% to 60% overnight. I'd take 5% any day of the week. So, even 1% incremental improvement has been proven to sort of really stack up in terms of results. And I suppose that enables and empowers your team members to go out there and do their job and smash it. But really as managers as well, if we've got a larger team, or maybe you're looking after more than one branch and you need that visibility, this really sort of helps to give you that oversight of individual key performance as well. So you've got sort of active data that you can manage in order to do your job, but then you've got management data that allow you to actually sort of build and grow a company.
Yeah, and it's that split that very much defined how we looked at the recent release of custom reporting. So, we had absolutely the management layer who, in a very traditional reporting sense, they want to be able to easily manage KPIs week on week. And, I had, a lot of managers, we spoke to dozens of managers, right? And, a lot of the feedback was around, you want to have those kind of in the moment coaching opportunities where devil is in the detail, right? Where really as a manager, a lot of them, particularly in smaller agencies, they want to be able to have the conversation. It's like, hey, you didn't ask this question during this booking, like why, that sort of thing. And being able to drill down into that level when you need to, hopefully not all the time, you gotta give the sales guys some autonomy, and you don't want to be breathing down their neck all the time. Yeah. But sometimes it is really important to have those performance discussions, right? That was really critical. But then there was a completely different set of problems that we were looking at from the day-to-day usage side, where and this kind of interesting early discovery with a lot of the work that we were doing is that basically with custom reports, we're just pulling out a bunch of data from the system in bulk, with potentially like dozens and dozens of columns, and it's very configurable and very personalizable, can be easily personalized. What we realize is like your day-to-day active like agents and users on the ground who are entering data in the system really love using these, not really as a report, but almost like action lists, right? Like almost as like their window into the system, and they've got a lot of tools at their disposal to be able to personalize and customize what data is getting shown and that sort of thing. And so You know, in a way, they're kind of using a lot of these customer reports for day-to-day little operations and using them as call lists as well. For example, it's almost like a you know, to the nth degree, it's almost like people are personalizing their own little mini CRM experiences from within the application. And that's not what you traditionally think of when you think of reporting, right? When you think of reporting, you think of, okay, you're generating some PDF and you're printing it out and sending it to some exec somewhere. And, you know, I think of TPS reports in Office Space. That's what I think of, right? But it's, yeah, you know, I think we definitely realized actually that there was a lot of potential to get that day-to-day and the interactivity of the reports right. And it's paid off a lot because most of the people who use custom reports today aren't managers, you know, which is actually fantastic to see and a really great outcome for us.
Yeah, no, I suppose you're right there. You know, sometimes the personalities within a business allow people to sort of hide certain things when it comes to performance as well, which the figures and the facts always sort of bear out. So you might have the nicest salesperson in the world and think, this guy turns up on time, he's conscientious, says all the right things in all the right meetings, and gets just far enough in order to sort of prove his value to the company in that way. But when you start to have a look at the sort of actual statistics behind performance, that gives you a different management perspective. And I think you need both, don't you, in order to, you used an interesting word, which I think was coach. You know, people do need, just as these customers need nurturing and this data needs nurturing in terms of possible future leads. And the greatest assets that we have are the people within our business, and we need to be able to nurture them. But frankly, if you don't know what they need from you, you're never going to be able to do that. And this gives you another kind of metric to measure that by. So yeah, it's interesting because
yeah. I was going to say, you know, what we see is a lot of managers, they create the reports of which they use for KPI management, right? You know, use it to pay out fees and that sort of thing. And then they'll share it around the agency as a link, right? And they're like, this is the report in which I will be looking at every week, right? And you can use it. You should probably bookmark it, you know, because what you see, when you see your name on this report, you'll be able to, you know, you'll be able to see exactly what I see, right? And that's actually been a really powerful, that direct kind of connection has been quite, I've heard it at least a couple of instances. It's been a very motivating driver. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I can see that being a sort of a positive motivator as well for some people.
Absolutely.
And they get visibility of their own data.
Credit for their hard work, David. You know, like I think there's nothing worse than you know, sometimes with these big complex systems, you spend a lot of time and effort potentially qualifying an applicant or gathering all this info or doing all the hard yards, you know, taking good call notes and that sort of thing. And sometimes I know in the back of your minds, a lot of people are like, well, is this just going into the void? You know, is it like, am I ever going to look at this again? Is everyone going to appreciate the fact that I'm actually dotting my I's and crossing my T's? Good reporting exposes that and really highlights the fact that, hey, you know, like our team's doing the right thing. You know, we're asking the right questions. We're being diligent with our data entry. You know, we're building this asset for our agency, which is our database, which is the biggest asset our agency has. And people can actually get credit for it. You know, and as much as we talk about coaching and, you know, helping sales staff, it's like there's a flip side to it where it's absolutely about identifying who in your agency is contributing the most into your database, which is fantastic.
Fantastic. So, you know, you guys are fast becoming a well-known household name here in the UK as well.
Household name. I like it.
Household name, right? That's
there you
that's
go.
what we're going with. But yeah, it's worth pointing out that you guys are extremely well known as well and well tested in Australia, obviously, where all of this originated from. And I often say, if we want to know what we're going to be doing here in the UK in 3 years' time, we look at what Australia is doing today. They seem to be a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of nurturing their clientele and keeping up with that data. I think every Aussie trainer that we end up listening to always talks about what they like to call data, but you know, we'll translate it. And what's interesting is that I think that we are just starting to get to grips with that here in the UK. So with that in mind, there are a lot of people looking at alternative CRM systems at the moment. How do they begin to start working with Rex? What are the next steps if they want to explore how they could possibly start to make the best use of their data that they've got in their systems?
I'd say we know that in the average CRM, 91% of contacts have not been touched in the last 6 months. They've not been contacted by that agency. So sat within that 91% of data are probably homeowners who are about to instruct your competitors. So what Rex enables you to do is surface that data and have it kind of at the forefront the entire time. What I mean by that is the concept of archiving data does exist within Rex, but is not what we consider to be best practice within the system. So we have these kind of strict process tools called tracks within the system that essentially enable you to nurture general follow-up with contacts in the database on bulk very, very efficiently. And so the concept basically means that every single contact in the database should have some form of nurturing journey, because unless they've said to that agent, do not ever contact us again, or unless they've died, there's probably a reason for some material of some form to be in front of them that is nurturing them from whatever state they're in at the moment, whether that is a current tenant, to turn them into a potential buyer with your agency, someone who's just bought their first home and completed on it 2 days ago, and you want to make sure that they are using your mortgage provider in 18 months time when they come to renew their 2-year fixed term mortgage. And you also want to make sure that they are going to be selling with you in 3, 4, 5 years time when they do sell that first home and they upgrade to their next family home. And that's kind of the best use of data within the system. There's a general obsession with constantly getting new data in and just churning it through a process and then flipping it out the other side, either with the result or just sticking it back in the archive and just consistently going through like a hamster on a wheel, just churning what you're doing, rather than actually leveraging what already exists. And it's way, way easier to go into the archives of your CRM and pick up good data than it is to be consistently pushing out for more and more data.
There's a nervousness, isn't there, amongst agents that it's the same hesitancy that we all have over prospecting, is that we don't want to go back and have an awkward conversation with somebody that we've fallen out of touch with and we've neglected. We know that. We know we should have been in touch. So we leave it and we leave it and we leave it. And we often think that the newest data is the less awkward data to handle because you've had a legitimate reason to have contact with me as an agency over the last 3 months. You've looked at a house with me. You've asked me to value something. So I can easily pick up the phone and say, hey, it's David. This is still a reasonable conversation to have. But most agents tend to sort of write off the old data. And you're 100% right. That's probably where the best data is, really. It's the richest mine of data if you can get into it. And agents need to sort of get to grips with that.
Absolutely. And, I think my advice to those agents is that you can kind of ease into it, right? A lot of those historical conversations, first of all, I think your average past client, for example, would be flattered if you've called them kind of out of the blue to see how they're doing a lot of the time. I think particularly if it's from a previous owner of a successful sale, that's just really good service. So I think those type of conversations are rarely, most of the time, I think they actually lead to a pretty positive conversation, right? Even if it's not necessarily always a productive one. The other thing I'd say as well is like a lot of those prospecting conversations don't necessarily always need to start with a phone call, right? If you're utilizing Tracks and Rex, for example, a lot of that long tail follow-up can be, via SMS and email, right? So you can kind of still keep the channels of communication open without necessarily, repeatedly calling the person up and forcing a conversation, right? And that kind of empowers them to reach out to you and engage at the level that they feel comfortable with, right? I think there's this, you're totally right. There's this like this kind of nightmare, I think, that that people have about, oh God, prospecting the database. It's like, here's a list of 200 12-year-old contacts, just start calling, right? And it's like, you absolutely don't have to approach it that way. That's like a real brute force way to do it. There's I think that's where a lot of the automations and nurturing tools and recs can be very you can be very selective with how you do it. And you can also triage, the prospects quite effectively as well, right? Just because they're, old, it doesn't always mean cold. I just came up with that. That's brilliant. I'm stealing that. Right? Wow. But it really doesn't, right? And I think part of it is being able to have a system that lets you pretty easily sift through a really, really old bunch of potential leads to understand which ones are you are really likely to have a positive conversation with, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
And no, it's great that you've got those different tracks that you can sort of reignite that conversation with, because if I were to liken it to getting in touch with an ex-girlfriend that you've not spoken to for years, a phone call out of the blue, she's gonna think something weird's going on here. But you can open up with a small text just to see, if she even remembers who you are, and then take it from there. Right?
Yep. You start off with the friend request, and see how it goes. And yeah, absolutely.
But it is effectively the same sort of scenario with that customer that you've not been in contact with for a while. You can start to ask them questions or feed them information that, depending on how they react to that, you can say, well, actually, look, getting really high engagement from Mark on this. I'm going to put him up into my sort of potentials. And then you work towards being able to have possibly a more open telephone conversation about your situation.
The more you do it, the easier it gets, because you optimize away the approaches that lead to awkward conversations. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So an example would be, we know that a lot of the time when a buyer moves into a property, an agent then just doesn't really have a huge amount of contact with them. And if you've got a whole list of buyers who you sold to from 4 to 8 years ago, for example, it is going to be a little bit of a weird conversation to pick up the phone and be like, hey, we sold you 4 years ago. How's everything going in the property? But a fairly directive email, which is titled something along the lines of, this is how much the Torbay property market has increased in value in the last 6 years or last 4 years, or however long it was since they last sold. It's probably something that's going to perk their attention a little bit, and then leads to opening that door slightly, dependent on how you're able to see, obviously within recs, how many times they've opened it, what links they've clicked on, how they've engaged with it, and then change the next level of follow-up. Is it again going to be something along the lines of email or SMS, or is this your opportunity to pick up the phone and say, and even be really blunt with it, hey, I saw you had a look at that email about 6 times. Is there anything behind that, or are you just really kind of keen on seeing how much equity you've now got in your property?
Yeah, I think it's that sort of soft nurture, I think, is going to always pique somebody's interest, and I don't think you're going to get that many messages back where people say, hey, listen, don't ever contact me again, because let's face it, we have this, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but over here we have an absolute obsession. It's our national obsession is who's going to be prime minister this week, and what is the value of my house. That's all we care about.
It's all right. We went through a phase with the former for a while. It was a rocky 3 or 4 years there for sure.
Yeah, but seriously, when it comes to sort of house prices and the property market, if you bump into somebody and you say you're an estate agent, the first question out of their mouth is, what is the market like in my area? And people do genuinely want to know where they're up to and what's going on. And we're very inquisitive. And I think as long as you can start putting that data in front of them and you can keep in regular contact with them, you're right. A lot of agents miss this, and they don't, they're not in contact with that audience of people that they maybe sold a house to 6, 7 years ago, and they're gone. And they, typically the statistics show that those people go on to instruct somebody else when it comes to selling their next house, but that you can drastically sort of bring that down, and really narrow it down if you keep in contact with them. You'll be doing something that pretty much every other agent in the UK isn't doing. We're not particularly great at having keep in touch policies, and I suppose this kind of reporting allows you to stay on top of that and identify it. So those agents that are looking at making that change and want to see how Rex can help, Mark, what are the next steps? Do they sort of just sit down with you and explain what they're currently doing, and you discuss that process? We've got lots of questions. Data migration is going to come into it as well. So I'm sure that's one of the commonly asked questions.
Yeah, although we said earlier that a lot of data has not really been touched in the last few years, and we say about how agents obviously are extremely protective of their data. Understandably, it has a big value to them. And we have now migrated agents over from, I think, every major CRM in the UK now, major estate agency CRM. So we have examples of having done that, and are confident with the data that we'll be able to bring across. So it would start by we'd have kind of a qualifying phone call, because essentially Rex isn't going to work for everyone. It's not going to work for exactly how everyone wants to work. And I don't think there is one CRM that fits every agency in the UK. It's kind of the beauty of why some are so different. But once we've done that, we'll jump on a Zoom. We'll run through a demo based on what they're wanting to achieve with their agency over the next 6 to 12 months. Is it growth? Is it process efficiency? Is it anything else that is causing a huge issue? Are they pivoting the model that they're running? And we'll run through the functionality and the overarching themes of the system, and see whether it's a good fit. And then we can look to have them on board, depending on the system they're using, within 3 to 4 weeks.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty quick. That is pretty quick. So I was going to ask you the question, and if you can answer it without just saying the best agents in the UK, but who, as an agent, does fit that profile? Who would work with Rex a lot better? Is it a particular kind of agent or agency in terms of approach, or is it more of a broad church?
No, what we found is that there's a mix of agencies who are using it, right down from sort of three user agencies where it's maybe 2 headline agents and an admin, for example, right up to a 200 branch agency that's using Rex. Wow. We've got good, extremely good penetration, I'd say, with self-employed or partner model agencies. And what we found is that the additional level of service that some of them offer, and the high touch, let's say stay in touch policy functionality within Rex, lends itself really, really well to that. And so we have some of the biggest names in that model on board with Rex. But that's not to say we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves into that element. We do also have a huge number of traditional branch agencies who are tech focused, who have aligned themselves to some of the Australian trainers as well. They benefit a lot from functionality within the system. But really, it's those agents who are a bit sick and tired of the CRMs that they're using at the moment, the lack of development on those, and the estate agency has changed in the last 3 years. It's changed in the last 6 years, since some of these CRMs actually had their last meaningful update.
Yeah.
So we're finding that with us releasing functionality, new features very frequently, they're seeing that this is making a meaningful change for how they operate. And we're also finding, just on top of that, the average fee of the agents that we have on board is significantly higher than what would be the average fee across the UK. We have some agents who their minimum fee is 2.5% in areas where their competitors are struggling to get 1.2. So yeah. It's very service driven, and those who are looking to be relationship based rather than just transactional are the ones who are significantly benefiting.
Yeah, transactional agents typically run after volume, and that's when they start to discount fees left, right, and centre. And you were talking earlier, Tom, about measuring KPIs, and sometimes where we focus on the wrong KPIs too much. So why are we losing those valuations? Be happy to take the business that you can get at the fees that you want, rather than just say, right, I want every instruction I can get, and to hell with the fees, because very quickly that KPI leads into you actually having a much lower average fee across the board. So we have to be careful how we push things, don't we?
Very careful. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think is it a cop-out answer? It's not, but I will say that one unique element to Rex, we've thrown around the word custom a lot, custom reports, custom fields. It's definitely, we've invested very heavily into this idea of personalizing the product. And I think that's part of the reason why we've been able to appeal to a lot of different agency types. Yes, we've absolutely, I think it really does suit certain types particularly well, service-driven, partner model agencies really thrive on the product. But I think generally the customization and configurability in Rex is second to none. We've definitely got I think a significant portion of our clients really value that aspect of the system above anything else, because it lets them work the way they want.
Well, it sounds superb, and I highly recommend agents to get on top of their data and to start to explore that with you guys. All of Rex's details can be found on kerfuffle.com. Thank you so much for your time today, gents.
A pleasure. Thank you, David.